In a decision that will echo through the halls of government and the corridors of global commerce, the Supreme Court has delivered a landmark ruling that is set to fundamentally reshape the landscape of U.S. trade policy. This historic verdict, handed down after months of intense deliberation, marks a pivotal moment in the ongoing debate over the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches of the American government. The court's decision invalidates a series of tariffs that were imposed under the Trump administration. Tariffs that had far-reaching effects on both domestic industries and international trading partners. By striking down these measures, the Supreme Court has not only altered the immediate rules of trade, but has also sent a clear message about the limits of presidential authority in shaping economic policy on the world stage. This ruling challenges the long-standing precedent of broad presidential power in international trade, igniting a nationwide conversation about the economic consequences for American businesses, workers, and consumers. Experts are now debating how this shift will impact everything from the price of everyday goods to the competitiveness of U.S. industries abroad. The removal of these tariffs opens the door to new opportunities for American manufacturers and exporters, who may now find it easier to access foreign markets. At the same time, it introduces a level of uncertainty, as industries that once relied on tariff protections must now adapt to increased competition and changing global dynamics. International partners are watching closely, eager to see how the U.S. will engage in future trade negotiations. This landmark ruling is the culmination of years of legal battles and policy debates, setting a powerful precedent that will limit the ability of future presidents to impose sweeping trade restrictions without first seeking congressional approval. Legal scholars say this decision reaffirms the importance of checks and balances in the American system, ensuring that no single branch can unilaterally dictate the nation's economic direction. With the era of unilateral tariffs now checked, the ruling urges a new era of collaboration between the administration and Congress. Policymakers are being called upon to work together to craft a sustainable, forward-looking trade strategy that balances the interests of American workers, businesses, and consumers, while maintaining strong relationships with global partners. As the dust settles on this judicial intervention, one thing is clear: the future of American trade will be defined not by executive orders alone, but by a renewed commitment to democratic process, transparency, and cooperation. The Supreme Court's decision marks the beginning of a new chapter in the story of U.S. trade, one that will shape the nation's economic destiny for years to come. Tariffs are taxes on imported goods, designed to protect domestic industries and generate government revenue. They increase the price of imports, making them less attractive compared to local products. Types include ad valorem, specific, and compound tariffs, each affecting trade differently. Proponents argue tariffs level the playing field against unfair practices, while critics highlight higher consumer prices and potential trade wars. Tariffs can harm manufacturers relying on imports, raising production costs, and provoking retaliation. The complexity of tariffs often leads to contentious debates on their economic impact. The Trump administration's tariffs marked a significant shift away from decades of increasing globalization. For years, the United States had championed free trade, opening its markets, and encouraging other nations to do the same. However, the new administration argued that this approach had come at a cost to American workers and industries, especially in manufacturing and heavy industry. The introduction of tariffs signaled a new era, one in which the U.S. would take a more assertive stance to protect its own economic interests, even if it meant challenging long-standing international trade norms. The administration cited persistent trade deficits as evidence that previous policies had failed to deliver balanced outcomes. Officials argued that these deficits reflected unfair practices by trading partners, and that the U.S. was losing out both economically and strategically. National security was also invoked as a justification, with the claim that dependence on foreign suppliers for critical materials could leave the country vulnerable in times of crisis. Tariffs on steel and aluminum were imposed under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, a law traditionally used to protect industries vital to national defense. By expanding the law's application, the administration argued it was safeguarding American jobs and ensuring the country could produce essential materials domestically. This move was controversial, as it broadened the definition of national security to include economic competitiveness. Much of the focus was on China, whose trade practices were seen as particularly problematic. The administration accused China of unfairly subsidizing its industries, manipulating its currency, and engaging in forced technology transfer. By imposing tariffs, the U.S. aimed to pressure China to change its approach to intellectual property, technology transfer, and market access for American companies. These tariffs were a central part of the America First strategy, which prioritized direct country-to-country negotiations over broader, multilateral agreements. The administration believed that bilateral deals would allow the U.S. to secure better terms and hold trading partners more accountable. Reflecting this new approach, the U.S. withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a major multilateral trade deal, and pushed for a renegotiation of NAFTA, the long-standing agreement with Canada and Mexico. Tariffs were used as leverage in these negotiations, disrupting established trade relationships and signaling a willingness to challenge the global economic order. Ultimately, the administration's goal was to create a more reciprocal trade system, one in which American interests were better protected and foreign countries were encouraged to open their markets to U.S. goods and services. This approach was intended to boost American exports, support domestic industries, and create jobs at home. Importantly, the tariffs were not meant to end trade altogether. Instead, they aimed to restructure the global economic landscape, encouraging fairer practices and more balanced relationships. The hope was that, by taking a tougher stance, the U.S. could secure a stronger position in the world economy and ensure long-term prosperity for its people. The 2018 tariff campaign was unprecedented, starting with solar panels. This marked the beginning of a significant shift in international trade policies. The U.S. government aimed to protect domestic industries by imposing tariffs on imported goods, hoping to boost local manufacturing and reduce dependency on foreign products. The solar industry, which had been growing rapidly, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight as the first target of these new tariffs. This move was intended to encourage the production of solar panels within the United States, but it also led to increased costs for solar energy projects, affecting both businesses and consumers, and washing machines, escalating to steel. The tariffs on washing machines were designed to protect American manufacturers from foreign competition, particularly from countries like South Korea and China, which had been exporting large quantities of these appliances to the U.S. market. As the trade war intensified, the focus expanded to include steel, a critical industry for national security and infrastructure. The tariffs on steel were among the most controversial, as they affected a wide range of industries, from construction to automotive manufacturing, leading to increased production costs and potential job losses, and aluminum. Retaliation from key partners like the EU, Canada, and Mexico followed. These countries, long-standing allies and trading partners of the United States, were quick to respond with their own set of tariffs on American goods. This tit-for-tat strategy led to a tense standoff, with each side trying to protect its economic interests while minimizing damage to its industries. The tariffs on aluminum, like those on steel, were intended to revitalize domestic production, but they also strained relationships with key allies and trading partners. Canada and Mexico followed. The focus shifted to China, with tariffs on $370 billion of imports. This marked a significant escalation in the trade war, as China was the largest trading partner of the United States. The tariffs targeted a wide range of products from electronics to clothing, affecting both businesses and consumers. The goal was to pressure China into changing its trade practices, particularly regarding intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers. However, the tariffs also led to increased costs for American companies that relied on Chinese imports, forcing them to either absorb the costs or pass them on to consumers, targeting a wide range of products. Retaliatory tariffs from China hit U.S. agriculture hard. American farmers, who had been exporting large quantities of soybeans and other agricultural products to China, suddenly found themselves facing steep tariffs that made their products less competitive in the Chinese market. This led to a significant drop in exports and financial losses for farmers across the country. In response, the U.S. government provided federal aid to help farmers weather the storm, but the long-term impact on the agricultural sector was profound, leading to federal aid for farmers. The trade war reshuffled global supply chains, as companies sought to minimize the impact of tariffs by relocating production to other countries. This shift had far-reaching implications for the global economy, as it disrupted established trade routes and forced businesses to rethink their supply chain strategies. The costs of these changes were borne by U.S. importers and consumers who faced higher prices for goods and services, with costs borne by U.S. importers and consumers. Despite disruptions, the trade war failed to achieve its macroeconomic goals. While the tariffs were intended to reduce the U.S. trade deficit and bring manufacturing jobs back to America, the results were mixed at best. The trade deficit remained largely unchanged, and many companies continued to rely on foreign suppliers due to the complexities and costs of relocating production. Economists debated the effectiveness of the tariffs, with some arguing that they did more harm than good by increasing costs for businesses and consumers and straining relationships with key trading partners. The trade war failed to achieve its macroeconomic goals. The long-term impact of the trade war on the U.S. economy remains a topic of debate, with some experts suggesting that it may have accelerated the shift towards protectionism and away from globalization. As the world continues to grapple with the fallout from the trade war, the lessons learned from this period will likely shape future trade policies and international relations for years to come. Legal challenges questioned the separation of powers in trade regulation. Lawsuits argued the Trump administration overstepped authority, using vague statutes to bypass Congress. The non-delegation doctrine was central, questioning if Congress had given too much power to the president. The judiciary faced a landmark decision on the balance of power in trade policy. The Supreme Court's decision checked executive power in trade, finding the administration exceeded statutory authority. The court invalidated tariffs without striking down statutes, focusing on procedural limits. The ruling narrowed future presidential use of Section 232 and 301, emphasizing Congress's role in trade. The decision reaffirmed Congress's primary role in foreign commerce. The president's trade authority is bound by constraints set by Congress. The ruling shifts trade policymaking back to Capitol Hill. The Supreme Court's decision brings relief to consumers with expected price drops on goods. Businesses reliant on global supply chains benefit from reduced input costs, enhancing competitiveness. Small and medium enterprises gain certainty, free from tariff volatility. Domestic industries previously protected by tariffs face new challenges from foreign competition. Financial markets react, with import-heavy stocks rising and domestic producers falling. The government must refund billions in tariffs, impacting the U.S. Treasury. The decision is welcomed globally, seen as a step toward a predictable trading system. Allies like the EU and Canada hope for renewed cooperation, while China sees a chance to reset relations. The ruling may slow the diversification of manufacturing bases away from China. It strengthens the case for resolving trade disputes through international forums like the WTO. The U.S. may re-engage with the WTO, restoring faith in global trade architecture. The decision impacts global trade flows and supply chains, creating new uncertainties. The Supreme Court's decision forces a new phase in U.S. trade policy. The removal of tariffs creates a policy vacuum for the president and Congress to fill. A new strategy must address issues like intellectual property theft and technology transfer. A multi-pronged approach with allies and new legislation is needed. Congress will play a greater role, with potential updates to trade laws. The decision presents an opportunity to forge a new American consensus on trade.